After that NATO summit last week, where all the allies gathered together in a heroic joint effort to flatter, to praise and otherwise be shamelessly sycophantic towards Donald Trump, victory was declared. Trump went away impressed with NATO countries, or so he said, recommitted to America's role in the alliance, and had a very positive discussion with Ukraine's President Zelensky, was even muttering about how Vladimir Putin probably wouldn't stop at invading Ukraine. Selling Patriot weapons to Ukraine was even mentioned. Well, that was then. This is now. On Tuesday, the White House said that it had paused the delivery of previously agreed arms to Ukraine, including air defense interceptors and precision-guided bombs and missiles. Those weapons, which were scheduled to be shipped over the course of the coming year, included critical arms in the constant battle to fend off Russia's attacks. The justification given by the White House was the typical self-interested language that we've heard rather a lot of in recent months. This decision was made to put America's interests first, following a Department of Defense review of our nation's military support and assistance to other countries across the globe. This is vapid language that could serve whatever purpose you really decided to imbue upon it. After all, on certain days, the United States concludes that it would not be in its interests to have Vladimir Putin's Russia successfully invading its neighbours, including America's long-standing allies. On other days, the word ally doesn't even appear in the Trump administration dictionary under America's interests, of course. Now, that much isn't news. Frankly, none of this should have been a surprise, although it does represent a serious outcome for Ukraine on the battlefield. I rolled my eyes at people like Yaroslav Trofimov, the chief foreign affairs correspondent for Wall Street Journal, who tweeted this: "So Zelensky did everything Trump asked him to do, signed away mineral rights, agreed to an unconditional ceasefire, and the US still cut off previously funded weapon supplies, leaving Ukrainian cities defenseless against Russian missile strikes." As I said here over and over at the time, the minerals deal was never about the United States making the slightest commitment to support Ukraine. If it had been, it would have been written into the agreement. And it was obvious, and yet people kept indulging in the wishful thinking that led to statements like, "Oh, Zelensky signed the deal to secure US support in principle for the future." And yet Trump's America had given evidence to anyone with eyes to see that it was repositioning as an adversary to Ukraine, not an ally. Now, that said, there were indications that the move had not been internally coordinated, and it caught quite a lot of close Trump allies by surprise as well. The key driver of the abrupt policy change seemed to be the Pentagon policy chief, Elbridge Colby. You may remember he's also the one who announced a major review into America's AUKUS partnership with the United Kingdom and Australia, on the grounds that it might not be America first enough again. Various senior Republicans noted that the lack of coordination had likely been exacerbated by the fact that the National Security Council had been shredded to a fraction of its former self. Republican Representative Michael McCall told Politico, "I think it's all made by the DoD policy director, this Colby guy. We essentially don't have a national security advisor. I'm not even sure Rubio was consulted on this one. There's internal division in the White House." Two US officials said that the Pentagon had not consulted with the State Department, the US Embassy in Kiev, or the Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg before this action was taken. Congress was also not consulted. According to those old rules that never seem to be enforced anymore, it should be so consulted, given that it had approved the weapons shipments in the first place. And that action had included pulling back a shipment of critical arms that were already on the ground in Poland. The White House denied that there'd been no consultation and said that the president had been aware of the decision before it was reported on Tuesday, contrary to some reports. Well, good for him. Certainly nobody else seems to have known. European diplomats and the Ukrainian senior team were left trying urgently to find out why the shipments had been frozen and whether this was going to be temporary or ongoing. Trump later announced he was going to have a phone call with President Zelensky to take place tomorrow, Friday, where it could be discussed. And then he announced he was having one with Russian President Vladimir Putin today, which obviously also caught a lot of people off guard. Last week, the administration took the first step, I mean a small one to be fair, to reducing sanctions on Russia. It was specifically focused on opening up access for Russian companies in the nuclear sector. The US Treasury brought in an exception to the ban on doing business with Russian banks where it involved civil nuclear energy financing. So just a small concession, but it was a start. So what did Trump and Putin discuss today? At least so far as the readout provided by the notoriously truth-deprived official sources. Well, according to the Russians, the conversation lasted almost an hour, was businesslike and concrete, whatever that means. Putin apparently told Trump that Russia will not back down from its goals to eliminate the causes of the conflict in Ukraine, which, as we know, is barely even code for taking control of as much territory as possible and getting regime change as well. Trump apparently raised the issue of a speedy end to military action in Ukraine, but did not apparently touch upon the ending of US arms supplies to it. Then they discussed the situation around Iran and the Middle East. No details given. The two leaders discussed the possibility of exchanging films, promoting traditional values close to both of their hearts, which is, I suppose, where you go next after you've both had your military parades. Anyway, that was about it. As for the White House readout, or more likely the Trump all-cap social media post, where I expect we get to hear that it was a wonderful call. Many people were saying it was the best call ever, blah, 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 blah. Well, we'll just have to wait a little bit longer. Probably it's out by the time you see this video. It wasn't by the time of shooting it. But in any case, I doubt it's going to add much insight or wisdom. Meanwhile, while Trump seems to be doing little but supporting and enabling his friend Vladimir Putin, he is taking the opposite tack with China's Xi Jinping. The White House announced that they'd struck a trade deal with Vietnam in advance of the 9th of July supposed deadline, and while it reduces tariffs against products from Vietnam from the ridiculous highs that Trump originally imposed, it seeks to discourage links with China, and specifically it puts a 40% tariff on any export from Vietnam classified as a transshipment, goods that originated in another country and pass through Vietnam. This penalty is specifically aimed at goods that originated in China, which has used Vietnam and other neighbouring countries to circumvent punitive American tariffs on its goods. And you have to presume that similar measures will become a feature of the deals that Trump strikes with those neighbouring countries as well, should those deals actually emerge. US trade negotiators are also pushing countries like Indonesia to reduce how much Chinese content is in their supply chains at all. And they're pushing the government of Thailand, for instance, to screen incoming foreign investment, hoping to stop Chinese businesses from moving into the country. As Steve Ockend, CEO of APAC Advisors, told the New York Times, the Trump administration is saying we need to see strategic decoupling if you are going to be a trade partner with the US. In other words, choose. And more specifically, choose us. Because right now, you're quite embedded in the US economy, so we can hurt you bad if you choose wrongly. But most of those countries are also pretty well embedded with China as well. So Vietnam, for instance, yes, more of its exports go to the United States, $118 billion worth, but $85 billion worth go to China. and China has shown in the past that it is willing to act very aggressively if it thinks there is action taken to harm its interests. Indeed, only a couple of months ago, China warned the other countries in Southeast Asia not to curb trade with it, to curry favour with the Trump administration. It promised then it would resolutely take countermeasures, and it repeated that when it heard about the deal with Vietnam. And of course, the obvious question is whether a string of further such details in the coming days will make Beijing revisit its recent agreement with the US on the flow of rare earth exports, where it has some real leverage. After all, it's hard to underestimate just how much of an aggressive move this will be taken as by Xi Jinping and the CPP. Correctly, really. Trump may feel like he's boxing clever and outmaneuvering his opponent, but it could simply be he's provoking an escalation of response from a leader who's much more used to this game than he is. Either way, Trump is as determined as we have ever seen him to throw chaos into the world order, even as Congress was today busy passing his domestic legislation bill to do much the same at home. As always, he seems careless as to consequences, presumably because he thinks they will all be borne by the other people. This is hubris, the like of which the world has seen before, and usually it doesn't end well.